The time a stranger broke into my house and knew my name. This happened when I was 14, I'm 17 at the moment, and still linger on the memory. I was home alone that night, as my mom was working an overnight shift, and my older brother didn't live at home at the time, so therefore I had the house to myself. I'd say it was maybe 9 or 9:30 p.m., and I was in my room working on homework, and listening to music with my headphones in, loud enough to where I really couldn't hear things. I remember for a fact that all of the doors were locked, and I stayed home alone pretty often, so I didn't have a reason to worry. Maybe an hour later, I decided to take my headphones out and take a break from homework. I heard noises in my kitchen, and footsteps walking around downstairs. Which was odd, because my mom wasn't supposed to be home until 7 a.m. the next morning. But she could have taken an early night for whatever reason, but just to make sure, I locked my bedroom door, and texted her, asking if she came home. It took her about 10 minutes to respond. But when she did, she said no, she was still at work, and why I asked? At that point I was freaking out, because my mom and brother are the only ones with keys into the house, and myself of course. So I decided to text my brother. Sure enough, he said no, he wasn't in the house, so I told both him and my mom about the situation. And my brother wasn't far from the house, so he said he would be there soon, and to call the cops. As I was trying to find a hiding spot in my room with my phone to call the police, I heard my name called from downstairs. That got me thinking, did whoever was in the house know me personally? A family friend maybe? I didn't respond out of fear of who knew my name and was calling it, and I didn't recognize the voice. I called the cops, and was on the phone with them, when my name was called again, followed by, "I know you're up there," and I heard someone starting to walk up the stairs. Again I didn't respond, but I was pure terrified. The police assured me they were on the way, and to stay put. I was still texting my brother, while this was all happening. He informed me he was 5 minutes away. That's when I heard the front door slam. After I heard the door slam, about 5 minutes later, the police arrived, and assured me it was them and that I could come out, shortly after my brother arrived back home. The police looked around the property, and all over the house, but there was no trace of whomever was once here. However, there was damage on the door, and lock from being forged open, and looked to be done by some sort of tool to pick the lock. Everything turned out okay, because nothing was taken, oddly enough. But the upsetting part is whomever was in my house wasn't found. From that night forward, though, we got cameras installed, and got a better lock. In the heart of that southern university town, where the campus and the local community intertwined, I embarked on a fateful night that would haunt my memories for years to come. I was just 20, a junior in college, eager to savor the newfound thrill of going out to bars with friends who, like me, possessed fake IDs. The atmosphere was charged with youthful energy, and I reveled in the attention from guys who were more than willing to buy me drinks. It was my first taste of such attention, and I played it up, basking in the newfound allure of adulthood. As I headed to the bar to procure another round of drinks for my friends, I encountered Jay, a man who would cast a sinister shadow over that night. He was a townie, one of those locals we often referred to with a mix of condescension and pity. In this college-centric universe, many townies were drawn to the bars, their troubled lives intersecting with the students' carefree world. Jay didn't seem particularly ominous at first. He struck up a conversation with me, bought me a drink, and we engaged in a seemingly pleasant exchange. But as the night wore on, he grew increasingly agitated when I declined to give him my number. His mood shifted, and he began making a scene, prompting my friends to intervene and extricate me from his presence. Yet, even as we distanced ourselves from him, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that his predatory gaze never wavered. It wasn't the gaze of someone interested in romance. It was a chilling, haunting stare. Desperate to escape his unsettling presence, I decided to join the guy I was seeing at the time, who was at a bar just across from ours. These bars were mere feet apart in a pedestrian mall, so I thought nothing of going there alone. My car was parked conveniently nearby, and I took refuge inside to charge my phone for a few minutes before heading to meet my friends. But as I sat there, I heard the car door open. It was Jay. This stranger had followed me from the first bar and now sat in my car as if we were old friends, oblivious to the terror he instilled in me. I was paralyzed with fear, unsure of how to react. He seemed alarmingly normal, completely unaware of the distress he was causing. It was a situation that grew scarier by the second, as I realized the gravity of the peril I was in. Thankfully, within what felt like an eternity, but was probably just a couple of minutes, the guy I was seeing flung open the car door and asked if I was okay. Relief washed over me as I explained what had just transpired through tears, my voice trembling with fear. He had arrived at just the right moment, a guardian angel in the darkness. His presence sent Jay packing, like a child who had been caught misbehaving. If it weren't for his intervention, who knows where I would be now, and what sinister plans Jay might have had in mind. The nightmarish episode faded from my immediate consciousness, buried beneath the demands of daily life. But a year later, it resurfaced in the most chilling manner possible. A fellow junior, H, went missing, sending shockwaves through the campus and making national headlines. Search teams scoured the area, and the nation held its breath as they discovered security footage of her leaving a bar, followed by a man, J. The search ultimately ended in tragedy, as H's lifeless body was found. The police investigation led to the capture of her killer, and it sent shockwaves through the university community. J had not only taken H's life but had also been responsible for the deaths of 2 other girls, making him a serial killer. Witness reports from those who last saw H say she was telling J, "I will not get in the car with you." J is currently serving 4 separate life sentences. I'll never go back there alone. This happened to me when I was 17 years old. I was just about to graduate high school. I was homeschooled and very encouraged to pursue entrepreneurship. I was trying to establish a photography business that I could run after graduating. In order to build my portfolio, I decided to ask a few friends and acquaintances to model for me. I asked a girl I worked with if she and her husband would like to model a couple's session for me. It would be a win-win since they would receive free photos and I would get to add them to my website as sample work. We planned a day to meet, and I asked them to meet me at a local park one evening. Something you should know about this park is that it is pretty far out in the country. The park has soccer fields, baseball fields, a golf course, and walking trails, so it is on a large plot of land and fairly secluded. The only house in view of the park is the caretaker's home directly across the street from the entrance. Unless there is an event or a weekend, there is usually not many people there. I felt pretty confident meeting the couple there because I was only planning to arrive about 15 minutes early to set up, so I wouldn't be alone long. The park has an entrance where you can drive down a road into the parking lot to get to all the sports fields, playground, and down to the pond. The front of the park has a large grassy strip, which is where I was planning to set up for my photos. I bypassed the entrance and pulled into a little dirt section at the front of the park and began unloading all of my props. I was always taught to be a cautious person, especially as a young woman, so I took a quick glance to see if anyone was at the park. I saw 1 car in the parking lot, and 2 guys tossing a ball in the baseball field, along with their pit bull. Across the street I could see the caretaker out in her yard, so that made me feel a lot better. I decided I would just keep an eye out, and continued setting up my things. I would glance up every now and then to make sure that the 2 men were still on the baseball field. I had no reason to believe they would bother me, but something in my gut just told me to keep watch. The couple I was waiting on seemed to be running late. I finished my setup and glanced up to check on the 2 guys. To my horror, they were gone. The car was still there, but the men and the dog were nowhere in sight. There was a bit of a hill in front of me that blocked some of the park entrance from sight, so I thought maybe they had just decided to walk one of the nature trails. But again, that feeling in my gut just told me something was wrong. I looked at the caretaker's house, and she had gone back inside. I couldn't get everything back to the car quickly, so I just grabbed my camera equipment and hopped in my car. I locked the doors, turned on the ignition, and got my phone out. Literally, as soon as I got settled in my car, I see the 2 guys coming over the hill with their dog. I feel my gut feeling melt into panic. You have to understand, there was no reason for them to come up to where I was. It's literally just an open, grassy yard. If the dog needed to relieve himself, there was plenty of place for that at the wood's edge, or the nature trail, or the walk to the pond. All of which were way closer to them than where I was. They walked around my setup, and when they got to my car, 1 guy went around the front, and the one holding the dog on the leash circled my car. I assumed that they realized I had already noticed they were coming and that I was no longer vulnerable, because they rejoined and walked further down, up and around through the soccer field. Once I felt like I was no longer in danger, I glanced down at my phone to see that the couple I was supposed to meet had apparently forgotten about it and were at the beach. I was so fed up at that point, I jumped out of the car, grabbed up all my props, and shoved them into the car. One thing is for certain, I will never go back to that park alone,